In December of 1993, a file called doom1_0.zip was uploaded to the University of Washington's FTP network. It contained the first of 3 episodes that would make up Doom. What happened next would establish the most notable first-person shooter in that the genre itself sprang forth from it. It wasn't the first, but it was the definitive. And today, gameranx is going to take you on a trip through the evolution of Doom. After id Software had created Wolfenstein 3D and its sequel, Spear of Destiny, John Carmack set to work on the creation of a new engine that could be used to create much more detailed areas and scenarios. That engine, which is now known as ID Tech 1, was the Doom engine. What the game Doom would eventually be built upon was actually a very interesting, and in some ways complicated, way of rendering a world. To understand how Doom works is to understand Doom itself and how it was a phenomenon, because it was pretty much the first to do so many of the things that it did. To the naked eye, it appears to be a 3D game, however, this is not entirely correct. It's actually considered a 2.5D game. All of the levels are built on a 2D floor plane, and a multi-layered area was completely impossible, meaning you couldn't have a room that was above another room. Another thing that you couldn't do was have a slope. You could have stairs, in that you would create small areas and give them differing heights, and you could have what looked like areas with different heights, and it functioned very much as we would expect it to in a 3D space. But the fact is, a lot of it was kind of faking you out on that, and the fact that it works so well is a testament to exactly how well the engine was written. The first time I played Doom, my immediate reaction was not, "I'll bet this is just a collection of 2D vertices with heights assigned to them." That being said, it did garner some criticism. Walls are drawn vertically, with textures applied to them, and the floor and ceiling work in sort of a flood fill-like way. They have an algorithm that actually draws them as horizontal, quote-unquote, viz planes. If you were able to use no clip, for instance, which was a cheat that basically allowed you to go through walls, you would see that the floor continuously goes on and on and on. Now this sounds like it might be overcomplicated or even in some ways unnecessary, but you have to understand this was a time where computers were not nearly as powerful as they are today. And in order to do something 3D, it had to be in a way that wasn't so processor intensive. This meant coming up with ways that could make something look 3D without it necessarily taking up a lot of data in the RAM, which, by the way, there was almost no RAM on systems at this point, especially compared to today's. Doom actually required 8 megabytes of RAM. 8 megabytes of RAM, and a lot of data had to be fit into that 8 megabytes. It's really quite ingenious if you think about it. The way they constructed levels and environments in Doom is not one that many people would think of, but it really paid off. Doom was praised and received numerous very good reviews. Rightfully so, too. If you had ever played Doom, think of it in comparison to other games at the time. It was just mind-blowing. It was completely different. And the guns, from shotguns all the way up to the BFG, Doom made a massive impact, and has been often listed as a source for inspiration for guns in countless other games. It also had a multiplayer mode with co-op and deathmatch, and was pretty much the forefather for all multiplayer and blew a lot of minds way back in the day. The feeling of running and gunning made Doom such a breakout title that one could even say it's what popularized the PC as a gaming platform. Now again, id Software had been developing these concepts for a while, but nothing had taken off like Doom. More than a few news outlets through the years have called it the single most important computer game of all time, and it spawned the Doom clone genre, which we now know as the first-person shooter genre, which is very interesting to think about because there was a time when people were more than happy to be called a Doom clone. Doom's strange business model, which was essentially shareware in that it gave you the first third of the game before you had to register it, whereas a lot of shareware gave you the full game and just asked people to pay what they wanted. So in essence, it functioned as an extended demo, but it worked, and it worked very well. Before very long, id Software was making in the area of $100,000 a day. off of a $9 game that they were selling through the internet. But where shareware works very well for exposure, it was not really considered by John Carmack to be a great business model once you had the exposure and recognition, and therefore he wanted to move into more traditional publishing deals once people knew what Doom was and who id Software was. This led to the creation of the Ultimate Doom, which was essentially the original 3 episodes, plus a 4th episode. Now the 4th episode is just a little bit less canon-oriented, if there is actually a canon for Doom. Some people consider there not to be, but it was nonetheless looked at as a very good, sort of special or definitive edition of the game that was available in stores. The next game in the series was Doom 2, which, although it didn't really contain any massive technological improvements, maybe some optimizations here and there, what it did take advantage of was the fact that computers were developing very quickly, and seized on the fact that more people would have better computers and develop much larger levels, and in turn gave the game much higher system requirements, at least by the standards of the day. Doom 2 actually had several expansions as well, with master levels for Doom 2 and Final Doom. Final Doom, however, didn't function as an expansion, but rather as its own individual product, and featured 2 32-level Doom 2 episodes, TNT Evolution and the Plutonia Experiment. The last incarnation of what you might call the original Doom line was Doom 64 in 1997. The game was still running on the same engine, albeit ported to Nintendo 64 obviously, and featured a gun called the Unmaker, which was essentially a laser, that used the same cell ammo as the BFG 9000 and the plasma gun. It was actually planned to be featured in the PC Doom titles, but was never included. Doom 64 would be the last Doom game for quite a while. Player interest had moved more towards Quake, which was essentially the same concept, but fully 3D and with scripting and several other features that just weren't possible in the Doom engine. In fact, it wouldn't be until 2004 that another Doom title would come out. Doom 3 is actually a prequel to Doom and Doom 2. Over the existence of Quake, the id Tech engine had received several iterations, and Doom 3 was developed on id Tech 4. Now obviously, through the life of Quake, the id Tech engine was now a fully 3D engine, making Doom 3 the first fully 3D Doom game. id Tech 3 also brought bump mapping, normal mapping, and specular highlighting to the table, and used a skeletal animation system that could actually blend animations together. Now that's in pretty much every game now, but in 2004, that's some pretty good stuff. Where the original Doom titles had more of a implied story, in that they had a scenario that played out, Doom 3 actually does have a story. It's told to you via NPCs, and various emails that you can find and read on your PDA throughout the game. The game went for a little bit more of a horror aesthetic, and was also set on Mars. Doom 3 was pretty well liked, but didn't have the same kind of impact the previous Doom titles had, and considering it was a comeback title, was a little disappointing. In some ways it just didn't really feel like Doom. It was an excellent shooter, and didn't deviate too far from the run-and-gun gameplay that defined the series. Something else that Doom 3 did extremely well was their lighting system. They unified the lighting and the shadow system so that all lighting and shadows behaved exactly the same. Didn't really matter what was making the light, what was making the shadows. They didn't have several different systems, they had one system. And it resulted in a much more consistent look throughout the game. An updated version was released on the next generation of consoles called the Doom 3 BFG edition. The BFG edition does some good stuff. It included, for instance, Doom 3 Resurrection of Evil, the expansion pack, as well as the Lost mission, and features updated textures and lighting effects that make the game look quite a bit better. But it also did something that I would consider mystifying with the weapons selection mechanics, where in the previous version of Doom 3 you could assign weapons to hotkeys. You actually had to cycle through them in the BFG edition. On top of that, the load times were considerably worse, and the autosave system was not ideal, but it also completely erased the original flashlight mechanic of Doom 3, which added a level of suspense, but did slow the game down a bit. And that change, I would say, is probably a bit of a double-edged sword. There was a span of 6 years in between Doom 3 and the Doom 3 BFG edition, which released in 2012, that also carried a few other titles in it. For instance, Doom RPG. Doom RPG is actually really fun, and while it doesn't really represent any graphical improvements over Doom 3, in fact looks very similar to the original Doom, it did do something very, very different. Rather than sticking to the shooter genre, it's a turn-based role-playing game, and has a much bigger emphasis on plot. Doom RPG kind of created a continuity out of what was basically a mess ahead of time. The character from Doom RPG, according to the Doom RPG website, is the same character from Doom, Doom 2, and Doom 3. There's also Doom 2 RPG, which uses the same systems, but actually has a different protagonist. The Doom RPGs were both released on mobile, as was another game by the name of Doom Resurrection, which was a fully 3D, on-rails shooter that used a lot of the elements of Doom 3, and it's actually pretty good. In 2008, actually several years before the 2012 release of the Doom 3 BFG edition, id Software said it was developing Doom 4. Now, Doom 4 was originally not meant to be a reboot, but as time passed, Doom 4 descended into development hell. And at the end of 2012, again the year Doom 3 BFG edition came out, id Software decided to make Doom 4 a reboot. As they were developing the new engine, John Carmack actually left id Software to go work at Oculus VR. Crytek's Diego Souza was brought in to replace him as the lead rendering engineer. The PC version of id Tech 6 is based on the Vulkan API, but is still compatible with the OpenGL API. The new id Tech engine runs on physically based rendering, which is a way the game handles light, which renders surfaces differently based on attributes rather than diffuse textures and specular maps, as well as the engine supporting motion blur, bokeh, which is that nice little bloom around blurred lights that you see, HDR, shadow mapping, 3 different types of anti-aliasing, directional occlusion, screen space reflections, GPU accelerated particles, which are lit and shadowed on their own, and chromatic aberration, which is what happens when the focus on different colors goes to a different place in a real lens. How that's handled in a virtual lens involves distortion on the image, which can be seen at various times in the new Doom reboot. id Software said their greatest challenge in creating the game was making a game that would be able to compete with more popular shooters like Call of Duty and Battlefield, because the first-person genre is dominated by these types of games and not so much by Doom, the previous Doom game having come out in 2004. And the solution, believe it or not, was to go closer to the original Doom than Doom 3, in including very fast-paced gameplay that feels more arcade than horror. Doom was praised by reviewers as a return to form for the game, with people having said that its single-player mode is essentially what other people aren't doing well. The new Doom just does it better, and although the multiplayer isn't really anything special, it's a great deal of fun as well, and who can really resist the way that Doom handles? It's fast-paced, it encourages you to chain your attacks, and adds just the right level of strategy to your overall gameplay. It continues along at a breakneck pace that is just unparalleled in pretty much any other game at the moment. It also comes with what's probably the most robust cross-platform mod/map maker called SnapMap. Now, is it the most flexible modding tool known to man? No. But considering what it is, it's pretty amazing. A programmer by the name of Patrick Roeder actually created a MOBA game just in SnapMap, and he did it entirely on a PS4 with a controller. Now that's pretty impressive considering there's no non-visual node-based scripting, and it really reveals the types of possibilities that there are that people could enjoy on all the platforms that Doom's reboot occupies. Doom has been a driving force on gaming since its inception in 1993, and it's come a really long way. And if the reboot is any indication, it's going to be something that sticks around for an extremely long time in the future, possibly continuing to push forward new technologies and blowing our minds in new ways. Doom is perhaps one of the biggest and most important game franchises that has ever existed, and the prospect of the next Doom game should excite anybody who's interested in the progress of technology. What's your favorite Doom level? Now that can be from the reboot or any of the previous games. I'm just interested. Meet me in the comments and let's have a conversation about that. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we will see you next time right here on gameranx.